I appreciate your honesty. You mentioned when you have kids, you're not sure you'll be able to keep up with it. I think most people would agree with you, although, I've been a father for 12 years now. I have a pretty diligent morning routine that I have learned over time. I'm a better person, I'm a better father, I'm a better human being, frankly, when I do that. So I do think there are ways to create those routines, even when you are a parent. So if and when that happens, we can probably talk about that at that point. I can certainly share some of my experiences.
I'll be coming to you for tips. Rangan, for sure.
The reason I started off, Jay, talking about purpose and morning routines is because the new book, 8 Rules of Love, which is such a good read. I struggle to see how anyone would read it and not learn insights about themselves, let alone their relationships, insights about themselves. And we won't have time to go into all the rules, but rule 1, I thought was really, really powerful. Let yourself be alone. And when you first hear that, you can interpret that in many different ways. But this idea of solitude being a foundational practice that we need to better ourselves and to better our relationships, I think it's really, really powerful. In fact, you write in the book that solitude is the beginning of love. What do you mean by that?
So I think it's obvious, Rangan, but we also don't always think about this, but life starts on our own, right? Like we are born on our own, unless you're born as a set of twins and then you don't have that. But a lot of us start our lives alone. We spend time alone. I think even today, talking about kids, I have a lot of nieces and nephews and friends, children and everything. And I found that parents have found that when their kids are entertaining themselves, it's great to leave them alone. Let the child entertain themselves. Let the child explore. Let them be curious. It's beautiful to see how a child can be so self-satisfied. Often we feel we have to entertain the children and keep them entertained, but sometimes kids can do that for themselves, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's something we lose as we grow older. And I think it comes from the idea, Rangan, that most of us inherently believe that being lonely or being alone is a negative thing. And I think this comes from our training in society and at school. For example, if you were the kid at school who ate alone, you were called a loner. If no one came to your birthday party, you were unpopular. If you go to a wedding and you don't have a +1, people say, "Oh, poor you, are you okay?" And so we constantly look at people who are not paired up with someone as less than. This amazing research study with college students found that they asked college students to rank how they thought their happiness would change if they were in a serious relationship or if they weren't in the next 5 years. College students said that they believed that if they got married or if they got into a committed relationship in the next 5 years, that their happiness would be an 8 out of 10. That's what they predicted. And they predicted that if they didn't get into a relationship, if they stayed single 5 years after they graduated, their happiness would be a 3 out of 10. So those were their predictions. They thought if we get into a relationship, we'll be an 8 out of 10. If we don't get into a relationship, we'll be at a 3 out of 10. The reality is they tracked and spoke to the ones who stayed single. Their happiness was at a 7 out of 10. The point being that people were much happier being single than they thought in their mind, which means we have a mental construct around how being alone is a negative thing. And so solitude is the beginning of love, going back to your question, because in solitude, you learn to love yourself. And when you learn to love yourself, you apply that same process when you learn to love someone else. When you learn to love yourself, you learn to love the parts of you that are seemingly unlovable. When you learn to love yourself, you get to learn yourself despite all your flaws and mistakes. When you learn to love yourself, you learn to love the truth of who you are. And by the way, when you fall in love with someone else, you're going to apply that same process back on them. You're going to have to learn to love them despite their flaws and mistakes and their regrets and their challenges. But if you've not done that for yourself, you will really struggle to do that for someone else. And so solitude gives you the time it gives you the space, it gives you the capsule, like the vehicle of figuring yourself out so that when you finally meet someone, you're actually able to much more quickly understand, are we operating at the same vibration, the same frequency, or actually, is this a person not right for me? And so I think you actually save yourself a lot of energy in the long term.